When I received my teaching certification, I began by teaching summer school at McKinley High School, 9th grade English. After that experience, I want not knowing the city of Buffalo or the school systems or the individual schools in any sort of depth, I decided to begin my career by substituting. This enabled me to get a deeper look inside of different schools at various grade levels. I began in the spring of 2000 and worked from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade in various buildings across the city. One day, I was called to Lafayette High School, the school that I had seen every day from my first place that I lived on Lafayette and Bain Street. From the moment I walked inside of the beautiful stained glass and wooden sports cases displaying trophies over the last 100 years, I loved the place. Quirky announcements, funny teachers, and most importantly, the best students. I quickly became a building sub and haven't left the building since, period. But it was not an easy job. Teaching is never easy. It can be thrilling and exciting and fulfilling and deeply gratifying, but it is always difficult and challenging and frustrating, sometimes depressing, and often overwhelming. I was in the building teaching Spanish in the basement on September 11th, 2001, when the first plane flew in to the Twin Towers. Period. Thankfully, when I was hired by the district, I was hired as an AIS, which was an academic intervention specialist. This allowed me to work with small groups of students and help to deepen and strengthen their literacy, their reading and writing skills. This was a godsend because I was not ready for a full classroom. Again, because of my unusual development as an educator, I really only had 2 semesters of education coursework. So began my continued search for how does one teach? I took all of the free classes that the district offered, trying to continue to understand how to be an effective educator. During this time, we were also developing our new theater company, Torrance Space Theater. torn space allowed a place for me to be able to create and explore and experiment. Cycling back to my interest in philosophy, I've always been deeply interested in the fundamental questions of existence. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where will we go? I've always been really interested to know different religious practices, rituals, and ceremonies. And through our work at the silos, been able to continue to explore and create within those inquiry questions, because we have a fictitious society who enacts an early harvest ritual every year. Period. The Agents of Change project, I feel, is a coalescence of these different interests that I have, which are performance and experiment and exploration. And we will be moving towards that shortly. Period. One of the most significant professional development experiences that I had during those times of sort of self-education or seeking out teaching education in the first 5 years of my career came from an amazing program by my former advisor and Dr. Sakon's advisor and Dr. KPC's advisor, Dr. Suzanne Miller, who developed a professional development for teachers in the city of Buffalo called City Voices, City Visions. It was through this professional development program where we were trained to use digital video as a pedagogical tool in the classroom. Period. This was my first foray into project-based learning, sustained inquiry, and sustained projects for students, and really strengthened both my teaching strategies, but also my development and understanding of how to implement projects in the classroom. Period. I started my master's degree. I actually had to ask for an extension because usually you have to get your master's degree within the first 5 years, but I had been so busy with the theater and working and teaching that I hadn't started my master's program. And so I received an extension and started my master's program at Buffalo State College. On my first meeting with my advisor, Dr. Adrian Costello, who is still a dear friend and who's gone on to other occupations but was an amazing educator, I sat down with her and I said, I'd like to understand more about my students. Every year I have some students who become pregnant and become excellent and focused students, deeply interested in their education. And then when they become mothers, sort of disappear from the classroom and educational setting, and many don't return. And I'd like to know what we can do to support and help them to continue and fulfill their educational goals. Period. And at that point, Dr. Cassell said, you might want to consider continuing on to your PhD. Which I ended up doing. Now, my goals that I had in continuing my education into graduate school, into the PhD to doctorate program, have been really one directional, and that is to continue to understand what are the best ways to facilitate educational experiences, period. What it has taught me is that education is an experiment. This new idea of universal education is just nearly 100 years old. And as we continue to expand the notion of education for all, there really is no one way, one best way to be an effective teacher. And I find that empowering and exciting, that this is a continuing exploration, a continuing experiment. There's not some answer somewhere in a book. It is something that we need to discover as we move along. And each year it changes, and each year the students in front of you are different and have different needs, and you will continue to refine, develop, recreate your experiment as a teacher. Period. This idea of researching as coming at education as a researcher, at coming at education as a grand experiment, made me feel empowered and proactive rather than reactive, particularly because I was teaching in a school that was always under scrutiny for being failing, for closing, for these punitive measures against a school that was just a result of an inequitable society and unjust system. During my time, 20 years in the building of Lafayette, there's been a change of 4 different educational secretaries, 5 superintendents, and 6 principals, and over 20 assistant principals. The programmatic structure, top-down approach has continuously changed. But that hasn't affected what I'm doing in my own classroom. You are in charge of the students who are in front of you. And you have the opportunity to create, engage, research, and experiment using the best possible ingredients and formulas.